Hi, welcome to qiphyedu. Today we'll be looking at how to structure an AS economics essay. This is a highly requested video, and today we're going to outline the most important things when it comes to creating an essay for the AS level paper. Now, for this particular video, I'll be covering the first sub-question. So for paper 2, there are 3 sections, section A, B, and C. For section B and C, we are required to create 4 essays in total. From 2 questions, you need to choose 2 questions from these 2 sections. And then for 1 question, there are 2 sub-questions. And then for these 2 sub-questions, you need to answer these 2 sub-questions. And then for the first sub-question, it carries 8 marks. For the second sub-question, it carries 12 marks. So today we're focusing on the sub-questions that carry 8 marks. All right. So now let's look at the core essentials for creating an 8 marks essay. First of all, it has to be knowledge and understanding, which carries 3 marks. Second is analysis, which also carries 3 marks. And then evaluation carries 2 marks. So for knowledge and understanding, you need to look at 3 things. The first thing has to do with the definition of the economics concept. For example, the question that may ask you to create an essay about price elasticity of demand, price elasticity of supply, government intervention. They could even ask you about balance of payments, etc. So we need to explain the meaning of the economics concept given. For example, let's say for example, the question wants the definition of price elasticity of supply. So the definition of price elasticity of supply would be the responsiveness in responsiveness in the quantity supplied when there's a change in the price, for example. And then let's say, for example, the opportunity cost. Definition of opportunity cost would be the next best alternative foregone if a consumer has chosen to consume a specific good. And then that will be for the definition, and then that will carry 1 mark. So now you have 1 mark. Now you need the extra 2 marks for knowledge and understanding. The second mark could be extra elaboration. For example, let's say government intervention. If I want to explain more about government intervention, rather than just to say the steps taken by the government in order to correct a market failure, to create a market failure, I can then explain that for government intervention, there are a few types. The first one would be price controls. Second one would be subsidies. The third one could be buffer stocks. The fourth one could be provisional information, for example. So I can explain that. And I can also explain that, for example, for price elasticity of demand, there are a few types of elasticities, for example, of goods. For example, there's price elastic goods, there are price inelastic goods, there are also goods that are unitary elastic, for example. So this is the extra elaboration that we give to this particular essay, which will then carry 1 mark. So now we have 2 marks, and then now we need the third mark. The third mark would be formula related to the essay. So in this case, let's say, for example, we'll take this one, price elasticity of demand. So the formula for price elasticity of demand would be the percentage change in quantity demanded over the percentage change in price. If it's price elasticity of supply, that will be percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price. So that would be the formula for these particular economics concept. So now we have 3 marks. And then now we look at analysis. So for the analysis part, this part is where we try to link everything together. So here we need to explain how the economics concept work, and then link them together. So the most important part of this analysis is that we need to explain how this economics concept can work with this specific thing required by the question, which we'll get into later. So this is actually one of the most important parts of this essay, besides knowledge and understanding. These two will reinforce each other, but then for analysis, you need to explain how it works, which will be a bit, you need more time, you need to be more focused on the analysis part, which I'll get into later. And then the third one would be evaluation. Evaluation is when you would evaluate the extent to which whether or not this economics concept would be able to work with your question. Then we need to know the limitations of these economic concepts. what would be the limitation? For example, let's say I want to use government intervention because I want to correct a market failure in the economy. But then the limitations of government intervention would be, for example, government intervention may or may not work, may not really accurately work because the government is unsure of whether or not this amount of subsidies would entirely fix a market failure due to the fact that to provide subsidies, you need to table this in Parliament, which will take time, time lag basically, and also and whether or not, and also, for example, provision of information, whether or not it's actually spread to every single household in the country is unsure because there's no accurate data to predict that, for example. And then also consequences of using these concepts. So what will happen if we were to use these concepts to actually solve our issues that we have that's given to us in the question? All right, so that's what evaluation is used for, basically to evaluate the extent of the economics concept used, and also what will happen if we were to use these concepts. And then the conclusion would be to come up with a solution that is to explain whether or not this economics concept will work, and how it will work, and whether or not it's going to basically like explaining like whether or not this thing will work or not. All right, so this is how you get. This is basically the entire outline for an economics essay. These three parts are important: the knowledge and understanding part, the analysis part, and also the evaluation part. All right. So I'm going to give you an example. Let's look at this sub-question. So the question here says, with the help of a formula, explain what is meant by the term price elasticity of demand for product. Okay, so I'm going to draw here formula, and then price elasticity of demand, and then consider the extent to which it allows an entrepreneur to determine the effect of price changes on the total expenditure on their product. So the thing here that we have to consider is, it says it requires a formula. Second, we need to explain the definition of price elasticity of demand. And then we need to consider the extent to which it allows a producer, businessman in general, to determine what will happen if they were to change the prices, what will happen to their revenue, in this case total expenditure, like how much would the consumers spend on their product and what will they get in return. All right, so let's look at the first part of the essay. The first part of the essay would have to be knowledge and understanding. This is basically where I highlighted right now. So price elasticity of demand is the responsiveness of quantity demanded for a good when there is a change in price. The formula for PED is as stated below. Now I'm writing this formula out like this because it's typed on the computer, but since in the exam you'll be using a pen, it's better if you were to write out a formula like this. Of course, it's better if you write it out. You have to write it out in 4 words instead of this shortened form. So you can see here, you can see that there is a numerator and denominator, or top and bottom instead of side by side. This would be how you write it in an actual essay. All right. So here we already have 2 marks because first we already explained the definition of price elasticity of demand, and we also have the formula. So 2 marks is already there, and now we need to further elaborate. So when we further elaborate, here's how we elaborate it. For goods that are price elastic, which is when PED is more than 1, a significant increase in quantity demanded results in a small price increase. This is because many substitutes are available. So for goods with a PED more than 1, this means that the goods are actually goods that are not considered necessities. People can choose not to buy them. People can choose whether or not they want to buy or whether or not they don't want to buy because it's not important in their lives. So here we explain that because there are many substitutes that are available, and the example of a price elastic good would be luxury goods. And then we can look at goods that are unitary elastic. So for goods that are unitary elastic, this means that PED equals to 1. So this means that when, let's say there's a 25% increase in the quantity demanded, then there will be a 25% decrease in the price. So you'll get a PED that is equal to 1. All right. So that will be the proportion. That will result in a proportional increase in quantity demanded will result in a proportional increase in price. Now, for goods that are price inelastic, which is when PED is less than 1, a significant price increase results in a small decrease in quantity demanded. So the reason for that is these goods are necessities, and when these goods are necessities, this means that you require people would require to use them on a day-to-day basis. So even though they there is a price increase for the goods, for example, let's say vegetables now cost $4 instead of $3, people will still buy them, or maybe they'll buy in a smaller quantity, but then they won't completely skip buying it because they'll need to purchase vegetables for their daily lives. All right, so goods that are price inelastic are basically, for example, vegetables. All right, necessities basically. And then so like what I mentioned here, examples of price inelastic goods are necessities such as vegetables and fruits. So that's for the knowledge and understanding part. And now let's look at the analysis. All right. So if you look at the analysis, here I mentioned, if demand for a good is price elastic, the quantity demanded will significantly increase when the price decreases. As such, this will result in a significant increase in total expenditure, which would then result in a significant increase in total revenue. So I linked up everything together to have an effect on the total expenditure and how it will affect total revenue when it comes to the price elasticity demand of these goods. So here you need to explain two sides of a coin. First side would be if, let's say, there is an increase in the price, and also when there's a decrease in the price. If you choose to explain only when the price decreases, you will not be able to be awarded an extra mark for an analysis for this particular question. You need to explain both sides of changes in price. So that's important, right? So here, what I mentioned is that, let's say we're talking about a price elastic good. So when the price decreases, the quantity demanded will significantly increase. All right. You could draw a graph out and then draw the elasticity like it's like a less steep downward sloping curve, and then you'll be able to explain when there's a slight decrease in price, there will be a significant increase in the quantity. All right, and then you can explain that by doing so, there will be an increase in total expenditure. Consumers will spend more on the product because price decreases, and then it will result in your revenue to increase as well. Because when there's higher expenditure from consumers, that means you'll be earning more. When you're earning more, there'll be higher total revenue. And then we can also further elaborate the reason by saying that this is because consumers will switch to a cheaper alternative, the good. Now we can look at the other side of the coin, where if the price increases, what will happen to the quantity demanded for the good. So on the other hand, if the price increases here, the quantity demanded will significantly decrease. As a result, total expenditure will significantly decrease. This is for price elasticity, for price elastic goods. All right. So now, likewise, now we're talking about an inelastic good. So likewise, if demand for a good is price inelastic, the quantity demanded will increase at a lower rate when there's a significant decrease in the price. Here you can draw a graph where the downward sloping curve is very steep. So you can draw a very steep downward sloping curve, and then you can explain that when there's a significant decrease in the price, the quantity demanded will you can also explain here, you can change this rules like they increase. So there's only a very small change in the increase in the quantity demanded. All right, when there's a significant decrease in the price, and because of this, total expenditure will instead decrease. Because for price inelastic goods, when there is a decrease in price, when there's let's say for example there is a 25% decrease in price, there's only, let's say for example, a 10% increase in the quantity demanded, and because of this, your total expenditure will decrease because it's less than 1. But if it's more than 1, then you will have a higher total expenditure. But if it's inelastic, the numbers will be lower because the changes is not that much compared to the price itself. So total expenditure will instead decrease, and as such, to increase total expenditure for price elastic good, the price has to be increased instead. All right. So then this will be your analysis as to how the price elastic demand will affect the total expenditure by consumers. All right. And now let's look at evaluation. Then when we talk about the limitations. However, PED is limited as it assumes other factors affecting demand, such as consumers' income and availability of substitutes, remain constant. Furthermore, calculating PED often requires past data which may not accurately predict future behavior, which is true. So when you calculate PED, everything else remains constant. As in this case, economics term, ceteris paribus. Consumers' income is constant, availability of substitutes is constant. So this is a limitation of PED. And then for PED, we normally calculate past data, like maybe data from like 2 or 3 months ago, 4 months ago, which may not necessarily be accurate for today's usage. All right. And then, but then for these particular issues, producers can address these limitations by conducting research and also substitute, and also to monitor the price of goods by other producers to understand the impact of the sales. So this is how your evaluation is structured. You need to explain the limitations and also, like what I mentioned just now, the limitations, or in this case, consequences. So the limitation here would be, limitation is that other factors affecting demand would be consumers' income and substitutes are constant. And the consequences is that you may not be able to accurately predict the future behavior of consumers for your goods. And then here we explain other ways of actually overcoming these issues, which is by understanding consumers' preferences using research and also to monitor price of goods. And then for conclusion, in conclusion, PED can be used by producers to estimate the impact of price changes on total expenditure. While it has limitations, it can be combined with market research analysis to strengthen its usability in maximizing consumers' expenditure on goods. So that's the conclusion, where you explain whether or not PED can be used by producers or not to estimate the what will happen when there's a price change to your total expenditure. And you need to remember that after your evaluation, you need to make sure you have a conclusion. This is to ensure that you explain the entirety of your essay in detail. All right. So basically, this essay itself has already fulfilled whatever I mentioned above, which is knowledge and understanding. There will be 3 marks for it, analysis 3 marks, and also your evaluation. In some cases, if you look at your mark scheme, they will require you to actually write a conclusion. Based on my recommendation, I will be recommending you guys to write a conclusion to explain whether or not this economic concept will work or will not work, and then explain why. So that is very important when it comes to these types of essays. All right. And so my advice is that for this entirety of this essay, you need to make sure that you have the correct knowledge and understanding. Make sure you have, if let's say they ask for formula, write down the formula. Expand your knowledge on the definition so that you'll be able to evaluate more about the economics concept. And if you can, draw a graph or draw 2 graphs if let's say it's related to that. And then for analysis, remember to make sure that you explain everything on 2 sides of the coin. First is you explain what will happen if it goes up, or what will happen if it goes down, or what happens if you go this way, but what happens if you go the opposite way. Link it back to the question where it mentions something like this. For example, for this question, it says total expenditure. So we need to link it back to total expenditure, how it's completely linked up, to make sure that you explain what the question wants you to actually explain. All right. And then for evaluation, you need to make sure that you explain the limitations, you explain the consequences, and then basically you can then further elaborate your evaluation by doing what I did here, and then concluding whether or not it will work. And like what I mentioned just now, make sure you have a conclusion. All right. So that's how you write an essay for economics AS level. This is particularly for sub question A. All right. So I'll be creating a video about how to structure an economics essay for sub question B later. All right. I hope you guys learned something from this video. Do share this video out to other people who may need help with economics AS level. As always, I hope to see you guys again in the next video. Till then, this is qiphyedu. Goodbye.